the Enlightenment. Just run back and review the Enlightenment just a little bit. What was the Enlightenment? You remember? Can you compare it maybe to the Renaissance? What was the Renaissance? The rebirth of what? Starts with an L. We're in here something history today. We're learning, right? So the Great Awakening or the Enlightenment is going to be a rebirth of learning. Because you're not long out of the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages and a time where learning was frowned upon. One of the biggest followers of the Enlightenment was Ben Franklin. He was a scientist and a gigolo, so he had a nice, round, full life. He loved to do experiments to the point where he risked his life by flying high in a storm with a metal key on it. I do not suggest this unless you are on that show Jackass. Then good luck to you. It's been nice knowing you. He invents something called the Franklin stove, which increases the efficiency that a stove can heat a home by approximately 40%. He toys around with electricity, and the big thing he does is he invents and discovers that if you have a lightning rod beside your church, and you've got that big old metal cross on top of it, that the lightning might hit that lightning rod and not burn the church down for the umpteenth time. So this is a good thing because we still use lightning rods today. Now, if they could capture the lightning energy in those lightning rods, you can heat or you can do power for a house for 3 days with 2 lightning strikes. So that would be kind of neat. You have amateur scientists like Franklin that are doing some things. They reinvent the telescope, and you all know that that's a bunch of bull because the telescope's been around for eons. The big thing is they're going to start classifying the animal species in Northern America. If you remember high school science and you had to list the genus, the what is it?
I don't remember.
The genus, the
phylum
species, what's the other?
There's like family, class, order.
Yeah. So you have these people to thank for that ridiculous little task. And they're also going to start doing something that the CDC is still doing today, and they're going to research why there are epidemics. Well, it can't be that hard to solve that problem because where do they dump their chamber pots? It's any dang on where they want to put them. So, and then we talked about the liberal theologies adopted, which they were a little more liberal than most, I guess you could say. And we talked about those, and the fact that they believe God is benevolent completely goes against what the Catholic Church or the other churches say at the time. Because if people are told to fear God, are they going to be scared to death and go to church every time? No. And pay their money and all this stuff. Oh no, I'm going to go to the hot place if I don't, give 10% of my income every year. Or, have the 7 sacraments, which I'm not sure of. Baptism, confession. Yeah. Anyway, they all have it. So you do have a little bit of a change in the way religion is viewed. Rational Christianity is going to be interesting. Most people will still read the Bible, and the churches are built and are on the foundation of Christian beliefs. So they're across the board. They're all Christian. They're just kind of different little groups of people. Like on Family Guy when Peter started the Church of the Fawns. It's like that. So, anyway, one of my favorite episodes. In the North, about 80% of the people will attend church. I repeat, in the North, about 80% of people attend church regularly. In the colonies in the South, everybody's too far spread out to do this. So they might have a minister every now and then. And the ministers are like, they don't have a church. Everything's going to go to, wearing a handbasket, and everybody will be sinning and racing farm animals with their petticoats on and all this sort of, all that crazy stuff. So you have a new religious revival that will sweep through all 13 colonies. about the mid-1700s. And this is the first Great Awakening. And the messages are going to call for a new birth. Just like the rebirth of learning, the rebirth of religious beliefs. This Reverend Jonathan Edwards is from Northampton, Massachusetts, and he's one of these classical ministers that will stand up in 1 minute preach to you about how God is wonderful and graceful and a loving God, and then the next minute he's like, if you don't do this, you're going to face eternal damnation, things like that. You have a bunch of circuit preachers. Circuit meaning they travel from town to town, going to different congregations to minister to them. So this guy, George Whitefield, is going to travel the colonies for 2 years and preach the aspects of the awakening. The church sermons, they're very theatrical. You might have people pretending to be, demons or evil people, and they might put on little skits and things. And this is going to appeal to people because can the majority of the people read? No. So they're going to learn through visual and auditory. They're going to watch the plays like the morality plays in Greece and in Rome, places like that. So it's safe to say maybe these guys are the very first evangelists without the TV. It's a Jim Baker pre-Civil War. Even though he got caught, but then Tammy Faye's eyelashes ran away, so it was really sad. By 1741, you have thousands upon thousands of churches and people joining them. So somebody's listening somewhere and people are scared. The aftermath will be that, especially with Whitefield and his traveling minister thingy, he can't stop just by criticizing the people he's ministering to. He has to go further and criticize other ministers that aren't as about it as he is, getting in your face. He wants their pieces. They have a laissez-faire attitude toward the souls of their parishioners. So he starts to criticize them, saying that they're not doing it right. I almost got kicked off of Fort Sumter because I told the tour guide he didn't have a fact right in the tour. I raised my hand. I said, "Are you sure about that?" He said, "I'm positive about that." I said, "Well, And he said, "Man, I think you'd be better taking the tour by yourself." And I said, "Gotcha, dude." So I took my husband and my father, and we went on the tour, and I gave it the right way. So yeah, this is the male version of me in religious terms. And I actually went to a Civil War reenactment at Mosheim, and we were at the embalming tent. It was funny. And the guy was talking about the steps of embalming and some of the medical tools, and I went, "Are you sure about that?" He goes, "Pretty sure." I said, "Well, da-da-da." And everybody started asking me questions, and this guy's looking at me like, I just left. So yeah, this is me right here saying, "You're not doing it right." Which is why I don't want to go to Charleston, because they don't wear butternut uniforms like they're supposed to do at grade. So I'd be saying, "You're not doing it right." They wouldn't let me do anything fun. So what's going to happen is he's going to start criticizing all the other ministers, saying, "You're not doing your job." More and more people are going to want to get involved with this, so you have lay people who will suddenly become inspired to go out and minister to the people. Now keep in mind, I come from a family full of Baptists. All of them, one branch, are Baptists. So I face this on a regular basis. Well, I did. Now they don't do it so much, but because I come back with stuff that they can't answer. So even normal people like me or you could go online and become ordained ministers and go start preaching or whatever. So with the Great Awakening, you're going to have even more problems with religious diversity, with religious beliefs. Can you kind of see why this would happen? you've got Henry over here preaching, God is benevolent and loves all his children and wouldn't do anything to hurt us. Then you got Joe Jack over here saying, you better watch it and do everything God says or you're going to be cast into a fiery pit. So can you kind of see how it would kind of make those divisions just a little bit more pronounced? And meanwhile, not everybody is looking at this and going, oh, this is the best thing ever. We've got to get in on this. The Anglicans and the Quakers aren't buying into that. The Quakers especially. Because their beliefs are already kind of liberal for the time. What do they believe everybody has? You remember? Something. The light within, very good. So they believe in this light within. The Anglicans don't really care what they're doing because they're having a good time. So they're the only ones that aren't going to be affected by this religious revival. The Baptists will embrace the thing wholeheartedly. Anybody shocked by that statement? I was raised a Baptist. Went to church every Sunday with my grandma. Went to Sunday school, went to Bible school, did the whole spiel. Got into college. I'm thinking, interesting. I learned how to think, mainly. In the South, you have Presbyterian and Baptist churches forming. There are different branches of Baptists. My family are staunch, conservative, Southern Baptists. They're here, and I'm way over there somewhere. They're going to sabotage each other's services because one group thinks they're always right and the other group thinks they're always right. It's like the Middle East. They've always been fighting. They will always be fighting. It's never going to change. The Anglicans don't like the Baptists because they have very strict moral codes. Anybody here know a family that's staunchly Baptist? Okay. Now, if you were to go out to Chili's, what's the chance that they would order a beverage?
My dad's side of the family are uber Christians, like uber Baptists. My dad has never drank in his life. My dad has never said a bad word. The worst word I've ever heard him say is freaking. My grandmother has stayed at home and caters to my papa like she is his slave. And whenever I would go to church as a child, I had to go every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday night, and I can never ever wear pants or like dress pants or like a dress skirt or anything. I had to have a long dress.
That's one of the more conservatively uptight ones.
Yes, and my dad always wears like polo shirts with dress pants and dress shoes, and he always made my mom wear dresses.
Made her?
Yeah. My mom didn't like it, needless to say, because my mom doesn't come from that part, and whenever me and my boyfriend moved in together, my dad didn't tell my dad for a long time, and he found out, and he ended up finally telling his mom and dad, and he thought that she was going to cry, that my nana was going to cry, and he was like, she didn't take it as bad as I thought, but now she's like buying me cooking stuff and all kinds of stuff. It's really weird.
Maybe she sees a way for you to get out of that cycle.
Yeah, I don't know, and like she wears culottes.
Yeah.
And she makes them and stuff, and it's just... And my dad's sisters, both of his sisters went to Bob Jones University, and never been married. His older sister's like 50-something, never been married, never been married or anything like
So
that.
I think we've all got a pretty good idea that these aren't party people. Yeah. I come from when I turned 21, my 21st birthday, where everybody goes out and does. My grandma's like, I can't believe you do that. I said, well, I do, so there. So you've got the Anglicans and the Baptists going at each other because the Anglicans think that the Baptists are too uptight and they need to party a little bit more. The county officials are going to start picking on the Baptist ministers. What religion do you think that these officials belong to? Not the Baptists, but because they're English, they're Anglican, so they're the part of people too. So they're going to start picking on the poor Baptist people. In the middle of all this, you have some Spanish Jews that are picked on and tortured, essentially, just terrorized at some point. The Africans are looking for just ways to not be on the radar blip. So they're kind of stuck in the middle. You've got the regulators in the Carolinas battling the coastal planters that have hogged up all the land and control everything. You've got the northern and the western colonies fighting over land boundaries. So you got all this going on. I mean, they're picking at each other, they're torturing people, and they're, saying, go out and have something to drink, have some fun, for crying out loud. But Ben Franklin, being the ever-optimist, says, you know what? I believe we can all still unite and be one country. I'm guessing he was an Anglican. So, yeah. Most Americans, they were not Americans, they were English. But society in this country had developed different than it had in Great Britain. Great Britain had been there for 1,000 years or more. So they had more time. The colonies have been there, what, about 100 years, maybe? Give or take. And their society is not as civilized. They're still trying to eke out a living in some cases. The colonials or the colonists feel inferior because they don't have the same opportunities as the people back in England. But here's the catch. They don't have to pay as many taxes. So that's a good thing. They have a simple lifestyle, and they're ashamed because most of the people back in England are boasting of this fabulous lifestyle with, champagne parties and big cotillions and things like that. And one thing that they're going to have that they do not envy of the people in England is the fact that they are in a more equal society, providing they're white Anglo-Saxon Protestant males. We're not in the 20th century yet. And they do have the semblance of a representative government. Now, in England you have Parliament, but does Parliament really work for the people?
No.
Does any government really work for the people if you really think about it? It's all about what can I get out of this? So that is the one-upsmanship. Aha, we've got more equality in the representative government. So, so that's the way it goes. You have an economic difference as well. You have a well-established bank in England, the Bank of England, and you have the East India Company that is like a monopoly of the trade industry. You have textile factories, mines, a lot of industry. Agriculture is a business. You have a gentry or an upper ruling class. In the colonies, most of the farmers own their own land, usually a few hundred acres. You have very little manufacturing and commerce. It's more of a semi-subsistence kind of lifestyle. In England, you'll have large cities with London at this time having almost 700,000 people. How many did we ever figure out how many people live in Kingsport? I'll have to look that up. But there are 670,000 people living in London, and in the colonies you have these little small towns, and the towns are small and have usually less than 2,000 people. Where do most of the people live? They live on their farms, right. So is it probably smelling a little bit better over here? Yeah. Can you stretch your legs and not worry about punching your neighbor in the nose because they're just right there? Yeah, I'd rather live in risk getting scalped. That way you don't have to worry about taking your hair out or washing it. So. You have a consumer revolution. People are going to start buying like crazy. In the 18th century, England is going to export a bunch of luxury goods, things like that, consumer goods. Hats are big. You may ever watch a royal wedding? Like when Princess Diana got married. I'm not giving my age here. I remember that. When Prince Andrew got married, when Prince Edward got married. It's all about the hats that the women still wear today. they're a very hat-oriented country. Have you ever been to England?
Yeah.
They're very hat-oriented, aren't they? Especially for special occasions, things like that. Yeah.
The Kentucky Derby has.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good example. So they're very hat-oriented. Of course, back then they had to wear hats because they didn't have sunglasses or sunblock. So they'd send like silks and satins and things like that, ceramics and glassware. If you had glasses instead of little tin little house on the prairie cups, you're there. And carpets and furniture. A typical farmhouse would have beds, a dining room table, a crude counter to cook and stuff on, and a fireplace that you would have to swing out the little arms. Go to Rocky Mount, it's all there. So they're going to send all these goods over there in hopes that they're going to sell them to the Americans. They want to, Americans, and I use that in quotes there. They want these, but they can't really afford them as much as they would like to be able to. Only the wealthy can buy the furniture and the textiles and the hats. And the people of all of the classes could afford tea, gloves, and interestingly enough, bars of Irish soap. What's that Irish Spring? Yeah, so they sent, and you can cut it and see the layers in there. So yeah, so they can get all this stuff. A lot of people don't use store-bought soap, as my grandmother used to call it. And they'll make lye soap. And if you want that recipe, I have it.
You say lice?
Lye, L-Y-E.
Oh, lye. I you said lice.
Lye soap. And gloves. Women didn't go out in public without covering their hands. It was considered trashy, I guess is a good word. And everybody drank tea. And so everybody, because you had to boil the water when you drink it, so you just put the tea in there and you have tea. And I've actually been to a tea with some of my family members, and I was sitting there going, okay, where are the sandwiches and the chips and the pop? This is just not fun. In England, the upper class will be only 2% of the population, but own 70% of the land. Isn't that just a bit not fair? You have aristocrats serving in the government. Are they going to care about the little guy? No, they're not. They're going to serve in the House of Lords. Other powerful families will serve in Parliament and in the House of Commons, but the House of Commons is supposed to be represented by the common people. I guess if you don't have the 3 or 4 titles, you're considered common. I guess that's the way it breaks down. You do have a middle class, let's call them middle, because they don't have an established class yet, with merchants, lawyers, bankers, things like that. And they do have power because they do control a lot of the money. So money talks. Any government, money talks. You have prominent families in the colonies as well, but they're going to be more equal because they don't have that long history and that established control, because they really haven't been here long enough. Even though they're upper class, they're not going to have the same lifestyle as they will in England. They might have a 3 or 4 room house. That's a lot. You ever see a little house on the prairie? Tell me what their house looked like.
It was just basically like 1 floor that had a small bedroom, a dining room, a really small kitchen, and then the 2 oldest girls slept upstairs in the loft.
Yeah. So basically it's 1 room, right? So it's separated by a fireplace, and then they add the kitchen later. At first it was just, the barn looks better than the house, I think. So they might live in a house like that and be considered to live in an upper class home. And you will have the real fancy houses, but they're not fancy on the same level as they are in England. In England's lower class, about 1/3 of the people belong to the middling class, which are traders, professionals, artisans, and tenant farmers, professionals being lawyers, bankers, things like that. And the other 2/3 that belong to the lower class will just be thankful they have some cabbage soup for dinner that night. And hope it doesn't smell too bad later. Now, have you ever heard anything about the diet of the people during the Middle Ages? And they had all this really good food, don't let it fool you. They ate onions, cabbage, turnips, beans, meat, and bread. Sometimes fish, sometimes pork. But they ate a lot of cabbage and turnips. So I'm guessing their bread smelled like feet. So yeah. In the colonial middle class, 3/4 of the white population will fall into this certain class, even though it's not a class yet. So they're going to have essentially what some of the upper class had in England. And the colonials they have a love-hate relationship with English society. They like the egalitarian society they had in the colonies, but they want to be just like England. You know those "I want to be like Mike" commercials? It's the same thing. I want to be like Prince Edward. The colonists are finally going to realize that the ruling class in England that tells them to do everything are getting rich at their expense. Which rock have they been hiding under for the last 100 years? I mean, think about it. So Franklin and a lot of his buddies, Thomas Jefferson and all those guys, are going to say, okay, there's an inequality between England and us, and they're using us, so maybe we can use this inequality thing to unite the people so that we can maybe possibly get some more rights and get some more freedoms. Is that pretty sound reasoning, you think? I wonder if he got that when he was struck by lightning flying the kite. I had an epiphany. Okay. The colonists don't like the government back in England because they don't have representation in that government. The English think that their balanced constitution is designed so every person had a voice in the government. Does every person have a right in this government? No, they don't. So is this a bunch of bull? Yeah, it is. The crown will represent the monarchy. Doesn't say the monarchy and the little guys, does it? The House of Lords will represent the aristocracy, which are the rich fat cats, the landowners. Does it say the landowners and the little people that work for them? No, it doesn't. And the House of Commons is supposed to represent all the people of England. But we know now that that's not true. Because you have the upper, lower classes and the lower aristocracy ruling that house as well. By the 18th century, you have a huge bureaucracy. Huge. And they're going to enforce all these laws that they're writing. They're going to start collecting taxes to the nth degree. And it's borderline robbery is what it is. And that's why Robin Hood robs from the rich and steals and gives to the poor. And they're going to start wars. And they're going to beat up on other people. In England, the politics boils down to the monarch and the ministers that run it. They appoint everybody, and if you know them, you can get away with murder. And only 25% of adult males can vote. You have to be a property owner to vote. In America, the colonial government will be similar to the structure of England, but more men will have the right to vote. There's a royal governor, there's an upper house and a lower house, and the assembly is the House of Commons, and it is populated by the middle classes, the people that have worked their way up, some of the upper lower class people, and they actually get some say-so in the government as much as they can. It's still not perfect yet. You have the Council of Lords, You can read all this. I don't think there's anything on the test about it. We have a colonial electorate. A representative has to live in the district where they serve. What's the problem that they're having with them being in the colonies and England being all the way across the ocean? Where their representatives live. In England, yeah. So they really can't get to them unless they write a letter that takes 6 months to get there. They're supposed to be available to their constituents to address their issues. They get represented, or they represent a portion of the population, or the population determines how many representatives they get. The representatives in the colony are less likely to be swayed by an executive because there really isn't one. And the American government will evolve to the point to where they start looking down on the English government. In the imperial system, the colonies were founded under a system of mercantilism where they would provide England with raw materials and then be a trading area for the finished goods. You have a board of trade and plantations, but these are run by the rich people. And England still has authority over the colonies in several areas. You have the Treasury, which will conduct or collect customs and royal revenues, aka taxes. The Admiralty Board will regulate trade, and the War Office will, of course, be there for the colonial defense. Parliament basically ignores America. It's like that, friend of a friend that wants to tag along to go to the movies, and you're just like, go away. That's the whole thing here. And Americans like the idea that they're kind of just doing what they want to do. Mom and Dad are gone for the weekend, so they're going to do whatever. They don't like the fact that they're required to trade with England, that they make a lot of money out of it, and they know that by trading with England, they are actually getting quality goods. It's not like the, made in China stuff now. I bought about 3 months ago, I bought a new purse. Leather, of all things. Had it 2 weeks and it fell apart. Guess where it was made? Taiwan. Then you have the 7 Years' War. In 1754, Washington will lead his part of the Virginia militia to Fort Duquesne because they're trying to stop the movement of the French into the Ohio Valley. So George Washington builds Fort Necessity. George Washington. He's the hero of something. What's he the hero of again? Revolutionary War, even though he did get him across the Delaware River. But he wasn't like this on the boat. He was hiding in blankets like they were. So Washington's this great military leader. He loses the fort within like 2 days. Here's another little bit of trivia. In the Revolutionary War, Washington was involved in 9 battles. 1-3. Show me a football team that will go to a bowl game with that record. Not going to happen. So he has to surrender, and he takes off running back to Virginia. So at the end, he retires and returns to Mount Vernon, his home, which he got when he married his wife because she had to give it to him because that was the law. And he gave up on wanting to be a soldier. He just wanted to be a normal guy that did not have wooden teeth. They were not wooden. He had a set of ivory teeth. He had a set of teeth made out of cow teeth. So in 1755, you have a new fight break out between the English and the French, and this will be the 7 Years' War. And William Pitt will come in, and he will take over for essentially the English win the war. 7 Years' War. All right, that's all of 4. We're going to get most of 5. Any questions? Comments, concerns? Okie okie dokie. In 1762, the Americans are glad to be part of the British Empire, and they're glad that King George is victorious in the 7 Years' War that they helped win. But, mere 13 years later, there's a drastic change in the way that the colonists are seeing England. It's like, when you're a little kid, like in my family, you think, oh my Lord, my family's just perfect, and they're just wonderful, and then you grow up and you realize, I always thought Great Aunt Tessa, was just acting funny when she was seeing invisible people running around the house, but I think she might actually be crazy. So when you grow up, you start to see things a little different. So the colonists are growing up and seeing Great Aunt Tessa for what she is. The colonists are finally starting to believe that England's trying to enslave them. Welcome to 1775. They've been doing this for years. Boston is going to become the headquarters of the hotheads. So from now on, when you hear me refer to the hotheads, assume that they're in Boston, because this is where all this is going to get stirred up. So Boston is going to be let's call it the ground zero of the revolution, because they're getting sick and tired of the British Empire. Because what does Boston have that they're going to get duties and import and export taxes on? Seaports, right. One of the biggest ones. They're not happy that they have to spend all their money on this. And after 1763, they're going to start seeing a bunch of differences between how they're treated and how the English people are treated back in England. And they're going to note the social and the political difference, because they already know they're not represented. You can't be represented if the government is thousands of miles away. And they're starting to think about independence. Think about it. Not decided to do it yet. So you have the next war, or the 7 Years' War. In 1755, they're going to get most of the French out of the area in question, and they're going to take the land, and then they're going to take the French people as slaves and scatter them to the wind. Sell them as indentured servants, things like that. So the British will win the 7 Years' War, but the French are waiting for revenge. How are they going to get revenge?
French-American War.
French and Indian War?
Well, that and the big one,
The Revolutionary War.
the Revolutionary War. They're going to help us get our independence from Britain. Let's just talk about the 7 Years' War. The French and Indian War. We'll skip over that. After this war ends, Americans have the audacity to expect their government in England to make certain things available to them. Not an unreasonable request. They want lower taxes. Who in here does not want lower taxes? Okay. They want to be able to get to the land that they've just won in the Ohio River Valley. It's very good land. It's fertile land. They wanted back some of that money that had been made during the war. The government's not going to give me that money. They didn't have stimulus package back then. The Americans who had helped fight this war don't feel that they're getting all of the praise that they should be getting for helping. And they're really going to get ticked off a little bit later. So they want them to say, okay, wow, we're really glad that you helped us out here. Thank you, you did a great job, but they don't get that. They want a little more consideration from England, from the British Empire. We're here too, we're part of you, you have to acknowledge us. And of course they want equality. Anybody in here think we've achieved equality today? Will we ever achieve equality? No. That's just not the way we are. That's not in our behavior to do that. the British officials are going to have different views of the colonial contributions to this war. And this is where the colonists get ticked off. The English government comes back and says, oh yeah, well, you think you did all this wonderful stuff? Well, try this on for size. You were stingy when you were trying to supply our army. They didn't have to supply it. If the soldiers took it, they wanted it, they took it. They're like, well, you're stingy. You wouldn't, give our army food and clothes and all this stuff, which was a lie. Because they did. They said that the colonial troops refused to fight because they were cowards. So let's get this straight. They're saying that the people that went to this new land and risked getting killed every day by a wild animal or an Indian or some outlaw were cowards. How'd you like it if somebody called you a coward? And you just, basically agreed to give up your life to help them out. It's going to be a slap in the face. This is not going to bode well with these people. Then they're going to say that Americans are selfish, self-centered, and unconcerned with the British Empire as a whole. Now, I love Dr. Phil. Now, if Dr. Phil were analyzing these people, he would say the one that's yelling the loudest is the one that's guilty of it. So, in reality, the English were this, and they don't want to admit it. They're also afraid that the colonists are getting a little bit irked with them, and I think they're right. And they're afraid that France will try to get back at them, back at England, by trying to get the colonies free from England. Are they right? Do they? Yeah, they do. But even in 1763, you don't have people wanting to be independent. They're still loyal British subjects. They're not Americans. They want to be equal. They don't know how to go about it. Most of them are the uneducated masses. Do the British see them as any way equal to them, even the upper class? No, they don't, because they don't live in the big fine houses and the castles and everything, with the tapestries and the pretty carpets and the wig powder on duty all the time. You have a lot of things going on the frontier at this point. The Indians are still attacking. Can you imagine? People are trying to take their land. How dare they attack? Oh no, what are we going to do? They can't defeat the British. They're too weak to defeat the British. They don't have guns or ammunition. And you have a lot of tension between the British and the Indians. So in the 1760s, a Lenni Lenape prophet named Neolin, and this is the first in the line of these guys, will encourage the tribe to return to the old ways. You will hear me say that again a little bit later about a different group, and resist the white settlement. You can't resist somebody if you have a stick with a rock on the end of it and they have a gun. You don't bring a knife to a gunfight. You're not going to win unless you're really good with that gun or that knife and sneak up on them. So the Ottawa chief named Pontiac, who the car is named after, by the way, will agree, and other tribes will join together, and you have a huge bunch of tribes that will work together. Now, they will seize all the British outposts west of Pittsburgh. This is their big stand. We're not going to put up with this anymore. If they could have had placards, they would have said, "Stay off our land, this is ours." But the British troops and the American militias will end the rebellion. And this is when you'll have the proclamation of 1763, with all this trouble that went on with Pontiac and all the tribes rising up. They will pass this, and essentially said there should be no white settlers past the crest of the Appalachian Mountains. You know, that's all good and fine and everything, but what about the, I don't know, 20,000 some people that have already crossed the Appalachian Mountains? They're already here, so they're going to, by restricting westward movement, they're going to try to get two things done. They're going to try to cut off the contact or the conflicts with the Indians. And they're going to keep the colonials near the seaboard so they can, tighten that grip just a little bit more, keep control of them. This is a nice theory. It's a good plan, but it's just not going to work the way they want it to. And then you're going to have an occupation by British troops. Now, in modern times, if you have a troop occupation of an area, for example, Afghanistan, what usually exists there? A state of what? War, right. So the colonists see this occupation as a condition of war, a condition of enslaving. By 1764, the British are convinced that if they leave an armed presence in North America, that the Americans will accept all the measures that are getting ready to be passed more easily. So they're saying, we'll keep them there, and if they have a problem with this, then we'll just shoot them or send them back to England and put them in prison in the Tower of London or something. By the way, if you ever go to England, go on a tour of that place. A friend of mine went and said it was fabulous. So if you're ever there, go.
That's where the crown jewels are.
Huh?
That's where they keep the crown jewels.
I'm not really that pleased with crown jewels, but I'd like to see the Iron Mask.
I was younger when I went, so I don't really remember, but I remember they had the mock-ups of torture devices, and that was pretty traumatizing.
I mean, you really have to think and give these people snaps, because they came up with some pretty good ways to torture people. I mean, have you ever seen Braveheart? You remember when they had him tied down to that, that thing they had him on, and he saw his wife coming to get him because she was a ghost, and then they just pulled him apart? And just pulled him into 4 pieces? Yeah. I mean, they have, like, the Iron Maiden, for example. And that's, that thing's just wicked. I like those. And then you have different water tortures. Hot pokers on various parts of your body, depending on your gender. Whipped, and you get chained to a wall with your arms above your head, and you get hoisted about that far off the ground you can't touch, and it basically rips your shoulders out of joint. I mean, all these cool torture devices. But yeah, people can be inventive when they want to. Too bad they can't use it for good instead of evil. After the 7 Years' War, the British are in debt, and because they have to keep troops in America, that debt keeps growing. The British people are bearing the brunt of the expense for the war, and Americans are really getting by pretty easily. Like the Boston Tea Party, they were protesting because tea taxes were too high. No, that's not why they were protesting. Tea was cheaper from Britain than they were getting it from other countries. They just had a bee in their bonnet and wanted something to do about it. It had nothing to do with the price of tea. It's just the principle of the thing, you know what I'm saying? So, Americans are really kind of getting away with murder. They're like the little kid that, you have 4 or 5 and you just get tired of parenting at some point. And the smallest one can go around killing small animals and you don't really care as long as they don't make a mess. It's that way. So, a guy named George Grenville's going to come along. And he's going to change everything. In 1733, something is passed called a Molasses Act. What's molasses?
Thick running chocolate.
Mm-hmm. And what is it the primary ingredient of? got a little captain in them.
Alcohol?
Rum, exactly. Rum is a favorite drink. So the Americans want to get molasses from other countries because it's a better molasses, especially from the Dutch sugar islands. The British want them to buy their molasses, and it really, in hindsight, would have been a good idea because it was cheaper. But then again, you pay more, you get the quality. So there's that old, do I pay more and get good quality, or do I pay less and buy more? Like stamps. In 1764, you have the Revenue Act passed, or the Sugar Act, and it will lower, I repeat, it lowers the duty on molasses from 6 pence to 3 pence. So it's the price of things going up or down. Going down. So here's what their plan is by doing this. They want to crack down on the smuggler. Well, if they just worked with the smugglers, they could have made some money. They'll catch smugglers, and then they'll be tried by the Admiralty courts, which was kind of went against English law, but they want to tighten the customs and raise revenue from American trade. They want the colonies to make more money for them. But despite all of these changes, Americans were not expected to step up and help pay off this debt. So they're getting their knickers in a bunch for nothing. Everything bad's still happening to the people that still live in England. You have the Currency Act of 1764. You have several of these acts passed. It will prohibit the colonies from making paper money legal tender. They can't use their own money as legal tender. Then you get one that starts to make people really, really mad. Because if the government told you you had to put up 2 or 3 soldiers in your house and feed them and they're not going to give you anything for it, what would you do? You'd be like, excuse me? I don't think so. So they're going to pass the Quartering Act. And the colonists, whoever they decide, if they come and say, you have to give this soldier or these soldiers a place to stay and feed them, they had to do it according to this law. And then this is what really gets me. The Stamp Act. And this happens in March of 1765. And it's going to put a very high tax on any kind of legal document. Any kind of legal document. So if you buy a house, you have to go file for a deed. Big tax on your legal document. Customs papers. If you import something, export something, they get money for it. Newspapers. There are very few, but there are some. Almanacs. What do they use the almanacs for? Crops. Who wrote the first almanac? Franklin, right? College diplomas. This isn't a real big because there's not a lot of colleges yet. Playing cards and dice. Which colony is especially going to hate that one? Party town. The party colony. Remember?
The Anglicans.
Rhode Island. Remember, that's where all the heretics were sent. So they're not going to like this too good. People that violated the Stamp Act were also tried in the Admiralty courts, which were supposed to be reserved for sea, for ocean crimes only. This is called ocean crimes. Even after all this, after all these crazy laws were passed, Americans can still relate to the English, but they're having a big problem with Grenville. They don't like this guy. And he will actually get kicked out of America for a while. The king actually pulls him out, or the guy's going to get killed.
What does no taxation without representation? Is that? I remember hearing something about that.
Okay.
In like middle school.
Yeah, okay. But what that means is that, like our government today, let's look at it like today. Anybody remember when Jimmy Quillen was our representative in this area? You remember? Okay, in theory, could you go talk to him about something? Okay, so what they mean by no taxation without representation is unless there are people or a person or somebody there that directly cares about the outcome of this small group of not wealthy people, has to be there and be able to vote on whether or not a new tax will be passed. That's essentially what that means. That makes sense now?
Yeah. I just remember hearing something about it, like in middle school and ever.
Yeah, so that's what it means. You can't tax us unless we have somebody there to voice our opinion. And in theory, you're supposed to be able to do that. It's nice theory. Which way did I do it? Okay, I'm going to do that. The Americans and the colonists and the British are going to fall back on the teachings of John Locke. I remember I mentioned him the other day, and he believed that in order to have the protection of the government, you have to give up what? Certain what? Natural rights. Rights that nature has given to you. And if you want a government to protect you, you have to give up some of those rights. So they're going to go by what Locke has written. Locke is also a big believer that property will guarantee liberty. What does property represent? Wealth. Wealth guarantees liberty. They're interchangeable. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Happiness, the pursuit of property. Property guarantees liberty. Wealth guarantees liberty. Is this true? More money you have, the more rights you have? Unfortunately, yes. And it will always be that way. Real estate and wealth and possessions are the foundation of everything. They are a source of strength for an individual, and just because they have this, technically they have a freedom to think and act independently. What is the general consensus of a group of rich people? Do they all have their own individual ideas? Are they cookie cutter? Do they all want the same designer, Prada, Gucci? Yeah, they do. Does one want to go to Walmart and just be a standout? No, they don't. Just because you have that and just because you have the freedom to think and be independent doesn't mean it's going to happen. Look at your high school cliques. Perfect example. They believe that protecting an individual's property is the right of the government, or the responsibility of the government. Is it the government's responsibility to protect our rights? Can you, like if somebody beat up your kid, can you go shoot that person? You trust in the government to do that for you. They take care of it in theory. They also believe that no person or people should be taxed without their consent or without representation of elected representatives. Does anybody in here consent to being taxed? I don't think so. I'm going to have to stop here because